My brother stole my inheritance when I was homeless. Yesterday, he showed up at my door asking for a job. Let me tell you something about betrayal that nobody warns you about. It doesn't arrive like a storm. It doesn't thunder and lightning and announce itself so you can board up your windows and prepare. Betrayal. Real betrayal, the kind that comes from inside your own family, moves the way fog moves. Slowly. Quietly. Until one morning you look around and you can't see anything familiar anymore and you have no idea how long the fog has been there. My name doesn't matter. Call me Sarah. That's not what's on my ID, but it's close enough and the real one stays mine for reasons that will become obvious the longer you listen. I'm 32 years old. I own a small house in a neighborhood where the streets are lined with oak trees that turn gold in October. I run a bookkeeping business from a converted spare bedroom with a window that looks out at those trees. I have a rescue cat named Fig who sleeps on my keyboard when he wants attention, and a houseplant collection I've managed, against all probability, not to kill. 2.5 years ago, I was sleeping in my car in a 24-hour grocery store parking lot. And the reason I ended up there has a name. His name is Callum. He's my older brother. And last Tuesday morning, he rang my doorbell at 7 a.m. asking me to give him a job. Let me tell you about Callum before I tell you what he did. Because if I skip straight to the act, you might think I'm leaving out context that makes him more sympathetic. I'm not leaving anything out. There isn't a version where he's sympathetic. But you should understand what I was dealing with. Callum is 4 years older than me. We grew up in the same house, same mother, same father, same kitchen table, same staircase, same beige carpet that our mother vacuumed every Saturday morning without fail. Our dad worked in insurance. Our mom taught elementary school. We weren't wealthy, but we were stable. Safe. The kind of household where dinner was on the table every night, and the bills were paid, and nobody screamed. By most measures, a normal childhood. Except for Callum. Callum was, and I want to choose this word carefully, magnetic. The kind of person who commanded rooms without appearing to try. Teachers adored him. Neighbors stopped their cars to talk to him. At every family gathering, Callum was the sun, and everyone else was happily orbiting. I watched this from a young age, and I noticed something that I didn't have the vocabulary for until much later. Callum was only magnetic when there was something to gain. When there wasn't, when it was just the two of us in the house, or when he thought no one important was watching, he was different. Cooler. More distant. He'd look through me like I was furniture. He'd borrow things and not return them, and, when confronted, look at me with this expression of mild confusion, as if my expectation that he return what he'd taken was the unreasonable part of the equation. He was never violent. He was too smart for anything that left marks. His cruelty lived in smaller places. In the sigh when I showed him something I was proud of, in the way he'd tell a version of a story that made him look better at the cost of making me look smaller, in the habit of remembering my mistakes with perfect clarity, while his own seemed to evaporate from his memory the moment they became inconvenient. I spent most of my childhood quietly sure that something was slightly wrong with my brother, and equally sure that I was the only one who could see it. My mother saw it sometimes. I know she did. I'd catch her watching him with this expression, fond but careful, the way you're fond of a beautiful animal you're not entirely sure is tame. But she never said anything. He was her firstborn. He was charming to her face. And some mothers spend their whole lives performing the optimism of believing their difficult child will eventually grow into something easier. Callum never grew into something easier. He just got better at the performance. Our father got sick when I was 27. His heart. Years of quiet damage that he'd mistaken for ordinary aging, tiredness, stairs getting harder, a chest tightness he mentioned only once, and then never again. By the time anyone looked properly at what was happening, we were already past the easy part. He lasted 14 months after the diagnosis. I won't spend long on those 14 months because they belong to me in a way I'm not willing to share on the internet. What I'll say is that I drove back to my hometown every few weeks. That I sat with my father through evenings that were quiet in the particular way of borrowed time. That my mother held his hand with the steadiness of someone who had decided to hold on until the very end and meant it completely. Callum visited less than me, despite living 40 minutes from my parents, while I drove 3 hours each way. He always had reasons. Work. His girlfriend. Something that needed doing. Our mother accepted these explanations because she'd been accepting his explanations for 30-some years, and the muscle was well developed by then. But Callum showed up for the important moments. The hospital meetings. The conversations with doctors about what was coming and what to expect. He stood in those rooms looking serious and reliable, asking the right questions in his careful voice, and everyone, my mother, the nurses, the doctors, me, was grateful for how steady he seemed. I know now what he was doing in those rooms. He was taking inventory. My father died on a gray Wednesday morning in February. Our mother was holding his hand. Callum arrived 50 minutes later. He said there'd been an accident on the highway. In the weeks that followed, there was the machinery of grief and logistics. The funeral. The relatives. The paperwork that death produces in quiet, relentless stacks. My mother was devastated in the way only a very long marriage produces when it ends. Not just grief but bewilderment, like the architecture of her daily life had been removed and she was standing in the open air wondering where the walls had gone. She leaned on Callum. He was older. He was confident. He was there in the visible, useful way. He handled calls and arrangements and logistics with the energy of someone built for crisis. He volunteered to work with the estate lawyer. He said it was practical, he was nearby, he had flexible hours, our mother was too overwhelmed for meetings. This was true. It was reasonable. I said yes, without blinking. I should have blinked. My father's estate wasn't enormous, but it wasn't small. The house, fully paid off, was worth around $260,000. A life insurance policy. Some investments he'd built slowly and carefully over 40 years, the financial equivalent of his personality, patient, steady, unglamorous, real. When everything was tallied, the total came to roughly $550,000, to be divided between my mother, Callum, and me according to a will my father had made over a decade before. My mother received the house and the largest share of liquid assets. Callum and I were each supposed to receive approximately $80,000. $80,000. I don't mind telling you what I planned to do with it. I had debt, student loans, a credit card from a rough year, some medical bills. I had a dream of starting my own bookkeeping business rather than working for someone else's. I had a spreadsheet, a real one with projections and timelines that I'd built and revised over months. It was careful and conservative and completely realistic. I lay awake, sometimes imagining what that foundation would feel like. Not giddily, not greedily, with the quiet, held-breath optimism of someone who has worked steadily for years and finally sees a door opening. Callum was handling the estate. He sent brief, assured texts every few weeks. Lawyers still working through the documents. These things take time. We'll update soon. I waited. These things take time.
He was handling it, he said.
Oh, he was handling it. I found out something was wrong from a mutual family friend at a birthday party. She mentioned it casually, the way people mention things they assume you already know, that she'd heard Callum had done something big with his kitchen. Full renovation. New appliances, the works. Wasn't it great that the estate stuff had come through for him? She smiled and went back to her drink. I stood holding a plastic cup of sparkling water and felt something go completely still in my chest. Come through for him. What Callum had done was legally intricate but morally as simple as anything gets. Over those months of handling the estate, he had redirected a significant portion of my inheritance into his own accounts. He'd done it through a combination of forged documents, my signature, carefully replicated, and a secondary filing that he'd walked our grieving mother through on a day when she was medicated for anxiety and trusting, and would have signed anything her reliable eldest child put in front of her. He'd also told the estate lawyer that I had agreed to defer my portion indefinitely to cover family debts. That I'd said I didn't need it. That I was fine. He had emails to support this. He had a signed document to support this. He had, I would later learn, been building this paper trail for months, beginning somewhere around the hospital meetings, beginning when our father was still alive. He had planned this at our father's bedside. When I got a lawyer of my own involved, the picture assembled itself with the horrible clarity of something that was always there, just waiting to be seen. He had taken $69,000 that should have come to me. He had left me with just over $11,000, plus some personal items that the estate had designated specifically by name, proving it was going to be expensive, complicated, uncertain. But I tried. I'm not going to soften this part or rush through it quickly as if it's something to be ashamed of. I used nearly all of that $11,000 to hire a lawyer and attempt to fight what Callum had done. My lawyer was good, experienced, realistic, honest with me in the way that good lawyers are honest, which means they tell you the truth even when it's uncomfortable. She said the case was winnable. She also said Callum would hire his own attorney, which he did. And his attorney did what expensive defense attorneys do, slowed everything down, made everything costly, turned the proceedings into a long, grinding marathon designed to outlast my resources. His bet was that I'd run out of money before he did. He was right. I stopped the proceedings after 8 months. Not because I'd lost. Because I was out of money and options, and I was so exhausted I could barely get through a full workday. My lawyer said we'd made progress. I said I knew, and I thanked her, and I hung up, and I sat on my apartment floor, and Fig walked over, and sat on my foot, and I looked at the ceiling for a long time. For months after that, I lost the apartment. The freelance bookkeeping work I'd been doing had suffered during the legal fight. I'd lost focus, lost clients, lost the careful momentum I'd built. The savings were gone. I got behind on rent. I tried to catch up. I fell further behind. The eviction notice came in September with 30 days on it. I packed what mattered into my car. Clothes, laptop, files. Fig and his carrier on the passenger seat, looking at me with his enormous green eyes, calm and watchful in the way cats are calm and watchful during disasters, as if they've decided their role is witness rather than participant. I stayed with a friend for 2 weeks, another friend for 10 days, a cousin's couch for a week. And then I ran out of people to impose on, and I was in a grocery store parking lot in October with my cat and my laptop and a sleeping bag that was not as warm as advertised. It was cold in ways I hadn't expected. Not just temperature, that kind of cold I had imagined and prepared for as best I could. It was cold in smaller ways. The cold of filling a water bottle in a gas station bathroom. The cold of the look someone gives you when you've been in the library for 6 hours and they've worked out why. The cold of doing the math on what you have left and what you need and how long the gap between them is. I want to be careful here, because I don't want to perform suffering for the internet. What happened to me during those months was real and hard and mine, and I've made my peace with it. I'm telling you because you need to understand the distance. You need to understand exactly how far I was from where I am now, so that when I tell you about Callum standing on my front porch last Tuesday morning, you feel the full weight of it. I was in that parking lot because of my brother. I want that sentence to sit for a moment before we move on. Short version, because the rebuilding is important, but it's not the point. I worked from the library every single day. I was disciplined with a capital D. I had a spreadsheet. Of course I did. I'm a bookkeeper. Spreadsheets are my first language, and I tracked every job application, every client proposal, every followed-up email with the focus of someone who understood that focus was the only tool left to her. I got small contracts, saved everything, got a room in a shared house after 4 months in the car, got my own apartment a year after that, registered my business officially with a name I'd been thinking of for years, and a logo I designed myself at 2 a.m. on a night I was too excited to sleep. Fig came back from my friend's spare room and resumed sleeping on my keyboard as if nothing had happened. The business grew, slower than I wanted, then faster than I'd hoped. I got clients through referrals, which in bookkeeping is how you know you're doing it right. I hired a part-time contractor. Then, too, I moved into a real office setup, the converted spare bedroom in the house I bought 18 months ago with savings and a small mortgage I can make payments on without panic. I got Copper. Wait, no. That's someone else's dog. I've got Fig. Big, orange, judgmental Fig, who approves of the house and the oak trees and the houseplants and tolerates me. I did not speak to Callum. I told my mother everything eventually. It took me a long time to do it, not because I doubted her, but because I was afraid of what telling her would cost her. She was still grieving. Callum was still her son. But I told her. On a phone call that lasted over 2 hours and left us both hollow and wrung out.
She believed me.
She was devastated. She said things about Callum that I'll keep private out of respect for the complexity of mothers and sons. She had not known. She had signed the documents he put in front of her believing they were routine estate paperwork. She had trusted her son while her husband was dying, and her son had known exactly how to use that. She told me he'd said I was fine, that I didn't need it, that I'd agreed. He had looked her in the face and said that. Let me take you to last Tuesday. It's 7 a.m, and I'm making coffee in my kitchen. It's the kind of early autumn morning that looks like a painting, gold light through the oak tree leaves, dew on the grass, absolutely no reason for anything alarming to happen. Fig is sitting on the counter watching me with the focused skepticism of an animal who has witnessed human chaos before and maintains low expectations. The doorbell rings. I'm not expecting anyone. I live quietly. I don't get surprise visitors. I dry my hands on a dish towel and go to the door and look through the peephole. And standing on my front porch, hands in the pockets of a jacket that's too light for October, is my brother Callum. Here is what looking through a peephole at your brother who stole from you and put you in a parking lot in winter does to your body. Your heart changes pace. Your hands go cold. Something behind your sternum that might be described as dread does a slow half rotation, like a key turning. Some old and animal part of your brain wakes up and starts paying very close attention. I stood at that door for a long moment. Fig appeared beside me and looked at the door, and then looked at me and communicated, with the subtlety only cats manage, that he was unimpressed with this development. I opened the door. I don't know exactly how I expected Callum to look. I suppose I'd imagined him unchanged, still the confident, composed, slightly too smooth older brother he'd always been. Still the person who could walk into a room and recalibrate it. He did not look like that. He was thinner. Not sharply, dramatically thin, but worn, like a piece of fabric that's been through too many cycles. His face, which I'd always associated with a kind of easy, settled authority, seemed to have lost some structural confidence, like the scaffolding had been quietly removed from underneath it. He had shadows under his eyes. His jacket was well made but wrinkled in a way that suggested it had spent time crumpled somewhere. And his eyes, when they found mine, his eyes did something fast and complicated. Surprise because I'd actually opened the door. Relief. Something that wore the shape of shame, without quite having the depth of it. And underneath everything, like a sound you feel in your molars rather than hear with your ears.
Need. Callum needed something.
Of course he did. Sarah. His voice was the same. Warm, careful, practiced. I know. I don't have a right to be here. He stopped. Started again. Can we talk? Fig appeared at my feet and stared at Callum with flat, unwavering judgment. Good cat. How did you get my address? I asked. Mom. Of course. I would be talking to my mother about that, separately and later. What do you want, Callum? He exhaled slowly. I heard your business is doing well. Someone from back home knows one of your clients, apparently. A pause. I need a job, Sarah. I'm not asking for anything big. Anything. I just need something, and I thought. You thought I'd give you a job, I said. I was hoping. I looked at him standing on my porch in his October jacket that wasn't warm enough. Come inside, I said. I'm still not entirely sure why. Maybe because some things need to be said across a table and in person, and not through a door. Maybe because I needed to look at him clearly with everything I knew and understand once and for all what I was looking at. I made him sit at the kitchen table. I did not offer him coffee.
Petty?
Maybe. But I watched him notice. His eyes went to the French press, to the mug I set pointedly on the far counter for myself, and I watched him recalibrate. In that tiny moment of recalibration was the acknowledgement of everything unsaid. He understood where he was and what he was owed here, which was nothing.
Good.
We were already being honest. What happened to you? I asked. Not gently. Just as a question.
He talked for a while.
The story came out in pieces. A relationship that had ended badly. I'll call her his ex, after she discovered financial decisions he'd made without her knowledge. He didn't elaborate on what kind of decisions, which told me everything. The breakup had been brutal and expensive. He'd lost his job around the same time, some sales role. He was vague on the circumstances of his departure in the way people are vague when the circumstances aren't flattering. Money had drained. He was renting a room from a friend. He was struggling. When he finished, I sat with it for a moment. Then I said, Callum, you stole from me. The kitchen got very quiet. Fig, who had settled on top of the refrigerator, opened one eye. Callum's face did something controlled. Sarah, you stole from me, I said again.
Calm.
Flat. Like a statement of geography. While our dad was dying. You forged my name. You lied to our mother when she was in the worst year of her life. And because of what you did, I lost my apartment. I lived in a parking lot for 4 months. He was looking at the table. For months, Callum. Through winter. The silence stretched. Fig watched from the refrigerator. I watched Callum. I didn't know it had gotten that bad, he said. Very quietly. You knew you stole from me.
He didn't answer that one.
Which was, in its own way, an answer. I'm sorry, he said eventually. 2 words, quiet and small, landing on my kitchen table. I looked at my brother. I thought about what 2 words weigh against $69,000 and 4 winter months, and the specific shame of filling a water bottle in a gas station bathroom. I thought about the spreadsheet with the timeline for my business that I'd rebuilt from nothing while he renovated his kitchen. What would you do? I said. If you were me. Honestly. He looked up at me. And for just a second, just one, the performance dropped completely. Not the sadness or the remorse or the tired-looking humility. All of it. And what was underneath was something so flat and calculating that it was almost restful to see it finally, plainly, without the overlay of everything he put on top of it. Then it was gone. The expression settled back into something softer. I'd probably tell me to leave, he said. Yeah, I said. Probably. I'm going to be honest with you about what I decided, and I'm going to be equally honest that I don't know if it was the right call, and that I've turned it over in my head every few hours since he left. I didn't give him a job. My business is mine. It exists because of 4 months in a parking lot and 3 years of work and every early morning and difficult client and sleepless calculation that got me here. The people who work with me trust that the environment they're in is built on something real.
I will not put Callum inside that.
That door is closed permanently, and I have no complicated feelings about it. I told him that. He nodded. He didn't argue, which surprised me. Maybe he'd known before he rang the bell that this part was never going to happen and had decided to absorb it gracefully. But here's what I did offer. I have a contact. Not in my industry. In an adjacent world, human resources administration, which is technical and detail-oriented and requires exactly the kind of brain that does well with numbers and processes. My contact owed me a favor. A real one, the kind that gets repaid in meaningful ways. I told Callum I would make a call. 1 call. Not a personal voucher. I said clearly that I couldn't do that with a clear conscience, and he needed to know that going in. But I would get him in the door, and what happened next would be entirely up to him. And then I said the other thing. The thing I needed to say since I opened the door. If you do to anyone what you did to me, your ex, your next partner, anyone, I have everything documented. Signed statements, the forged paperwork, the lawyer's records from my case. I should have made more noise at the time. I didn't because I was trying to survive. I'm not in survival mode anymore. He held my gaze. I understand, he said. Whether Callum understands things the way other people do, whether anything passes through some genuine moral center in him, or whether it all gets processed through a colder calculator, I genuinely don't know. I've wondered about that my whole life. I wonder about it now. He stood, thanked me, walked to my front door. At the threshold, he turned back, looked at the house, looked at me. You did good, he said. With all of it, you did really good. I didn't say anything. He walked down the porch steps and got into a car that was older and more tired-looking than anything he would have driven 3 years ago, and he sat in it for a moment, I don't know why, some private thing, and then he drove away. I closed the door. Fig dropped down from the refrigerator, walked over, and sat on my foot. I looked down at him.
He looked up at me.
I went and got my coffee, which had gone cold, and I drank it cold in my kitchen with my cat on my foot, and the October light coming through the window, and the oak trees doing their gold quiet thing outside, and I sat with all of it for a very long time. Here's what I know about being wronged badly by someone you should have been able to trust. You don't get it back. Not the money. Not the months. Not the version of yourself who existed before the floor dropped out. There's no final scene where the scales balance and everyone walks away clean. That's not how it works. What you get if you work for it and survive it is something different. Something harder to measure. You get the knowledge that you survived the thing you most feared. That you lost everything and built it back. That the worst that someone could do to you happened. It really happened, and you are here on the other side of it, cold coffee in hand, cat on foot, October light on oak trees. You get to know what you're made of. And what you're made of turns out to be more than anyone, including yourself, had fully accounted for. Callum might use the contact. He might not. He might rebuild something, or he might keep making the same calculations with the same cold arithmetic that got him here. That's not my chapter to write. Mine is this kitchen. This cat. This business I built from a parking lot on up. Mine is the door I opened and looked through, and was not afraid of what I saw. Mine is this. And this, it turns out, is enough.